And now mind you, I'm not one of these big kick the gentrifiers out of here. They change this, they're making everything worse and stuff like that. I'm not all that. I'm all about inclusion, because at the end of the day, we're all immigrants in this country. Nobody is nobody really has a stake here except for the natives.
That was motivational speaker Uncle Damien. I'm Jeff, and this is Storied San Francisco. Every week on this podcast, you'll hear from community leaders, musicians, bartenders, and San Franciscans from all walks of life, telling stories, sharing personal histories, and trying to put into words what makes this city so special. Welcome to episode 38, part 1. In this podcast, Damien talks about his life leading up to his becoming Uncle Damien. He lacked positive male influences when he was a kid in San Francisco, and, as he freely admits, he got into a lot of trouble. But perhaps because of those bad decisions and the awakenings they later inspired in his life, he became who he is today. Here's Uncle Damien.
I'm Uncle Damien because I think that's why we connected, because I was in my Uncle Damien zone. You know what I mean? But I am Damien Posey, Damien Charles Posey, affectionately known in the community as Uncle Damien. Just a community uncle, trying to give back, try to be that good, positive uncle that any and everybody needs, especially the youth. I know when I was growing up, I would have preferred to be to have a stronger father figure at all, but I know a good uncle would have helped out as well. And unfortunately, I can't be everybody's father. You know what I mean? But I can be everybody's uncle. You know what I mean? Because uncle, you don't have to have that much responsibility.
You come around,
right? Yeah, you got some responsibility, but you just the uncle, and not that I'm lazy or anything. It just gives me the opportunity to be able to spread the love to everyone.
You told me you were born and raised General Hospital.
Born and raised San Francisco, man. All my life, General Hospital. 9/11, 1978. To Miss Renee Posey, my mother. She was 16 years old at the time. Pushing me out, you know what I mean? So yeah, man, General Hospital, and I've been here predominantly all my life. My little sister was born in St. Luke's. So my people are from Texas and Baton Rouge,
Where in Texas?
I'm not 100% sure.
Maybe closer to Louisiana, that area.
Right, yeah, probably. You know what I'm saying? My great-grandmother's from Texas. I know that, but I know, majority of my family's from Baton Rouge. I just went down there. My little sister lives there back now, and she just had a little girl, my little niece. So
you're a real uncle too.
Oh yeah, I'm definitely a real uncle. Yeah. She's got 2 kids.
Okay.
So our family's from Baton Rouge, but we consider ourselves San Franciscans, pure and true. Went to school, McAteer High School. Went to several little middle schools. Roosevelt is the one that I remember the most. Roosevelt, and with the Gene Parker, and with the Edison. Like I said, my mother was young when she had me, so housing was not that stable. We stayed with my grandmother sometimes in Daly City.
Cheers.
Stay with my grandmother sometimes in Daly City, and but the majority is in San Francisco. Went to school. A lot of time in juvenile hall, YGC, Youth Guidance Center. But I'm assuming we'll get into that a little bit. But yeah, definitely San Francisco native, tatted up, 49er, Giants, all that. You know what I mean?
Nice.
All that.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about some of that stuff, because growing up,
so
you grew up in the 80s and 90s, sounds like.
I was born in 78, yeah.
Yeah. What was it like, man?
Back when nobody wanted Warriors tickets, now you can't get them. You know what I mean? They used to come. So I predominantly grew up in the Bayview, Hunters Point, Fillmore district, even though I lived all over. But yeah, it was pretty, it's different from what it is now, that's for sure. Of course, a single parent household, so we didn't always have all of the necessities that we had. Definitely was on welfare. My mother trying to raise 2 kids on her own. My sister was born 2 years after me, so we were both young, and it's funny, my little sister did the same thing. She had a boy, my nephew Fernando, and when he was 2 years old, then she had my other niece, her daughter. So she's got the same scenario as me and her, but she's created a beautiful family for herself. So but yeah, it was.
What kind of things did you and your family, or you and your friends do back growing up that you feel like might be gone or you can't do now?
Well, growing up in the hood, it wasn't a whole lot to do. A lot of outside playing with nothing. You know what I mean? Just making up games on your own. We had some stuff, but like I said, we moved around a lot. Me and my mom and my little sister, we moved around a lot. A lot of the time, my little sister stayed with my grandparents because she was a girl. She's a female, so I think they were a little bit more worried about her in our unstability. As me being a boy, I'm more rough and tumble, so I'm just like rolling with the punches with my mom. And she was young. She likes to always say we grew up together. Because I think she made a lot of decisions that she probably would not make today when she was younger. I went through a phase where I faulted her for a lot of stuff, but I grew out of that, especially being a parent now myself. I have a daughter, so I understand being a parent is not that easy, and she did the best she could with what she had and with her knowledge, but growing up, the fun center's gone downtown. I used to go downtown a lot. The fun center's gone, nowhere for the kids really to openly play video games. That was big for us.
How did you get downtown when you went there? Like
the 15th Third, man. The 15th Third, baby, all the time. Because see, I used to try to hang out in the hood and different stuff on the blocks and stuff, and my mom and my auntie, they used to they were like, I didn't even have to worry about the police. I had to worry about them. You know what I'm saying? Chasing me around and trying to keep me out of trouble, at times when she wasn't getting into her own trouble, my mom, and she was on me. So I used to not be able to hang around in Hunters Point as much. So I used to catch the bus downtown, hop on the back of the bus, then, hop on the back of the bus, go beg for some change. When I was younger, beg for some change, get that money and play video games. As I got older.
Where was Fun Center? I don't think I've heard of that.
It was on Market Street between 6th and 7th.
Okay.
It's like a big arcade. It was like a huge garage full of video games. Awesome. About 75 to 80 video games in there. And just it was a torture for the stores on Market Street and for the police and schools, because all the kids used to cut school and go there, even though I had a rule you had to be a certain age, but wasn't nobody paying attention. They had that little attendance there. They couldn't. It's it's nothing you can do when you got a group of rowdy kids really trying to, But that's where all the truant officers used to go first, to look for the kids and stuff down there. Yeah. But yeah, the Fun Center was real memorable for me.
What a cool name too.
Yeah.
I want to hang out at the Fun Center.
Right. Yeah, just hung out a lot on Geneva and Mission. Just in my quote unquote gangbanging days. Stuff like that. I actually got shot on Geneva Mission when I was 13 years old. Just turned 13 and everything.
Do you want to talk what happened, if I can ask?
So I used to hang on Geneva, and there was we used to have a crew called GMP, Geneva Mission Posse. It was kind of like a mashup of youngsters who kind of lived in that area, and some didn't. Some came from other places and just was finding their way. Some older guys, and we used to beef with these with a couple other crews, and one of them was a vigilante crew, was a Filipino gang in the Daly City area, because we were clicked up. They were supposed to be Asian Crips, and then we were clicked up with some Asian Bloods, RPB, Real Pinoy Bloods, out of Daly City. So one day they came through blasting, man. I was outside out front one night, and it wasn't direct. I got skimmed. I didn't even know I was hit till I got home. I never even really told my mom or anybody. I was oh no. I was more scared of her whipping my butt than getting shot.
You
know
said,
what I mean?
Yeah.
So
So not afraid of cops or bullets skimming your. Yeah.
My mom would whoop that ass for real. I don't know if I can curse. I apologize.
You just did.
Right?
No, you can't for sure.
But yeah, she'll get, and it's through all her, youth, she did her best to try to raise us to the best of our knowledge, you know. But yeah, that happened. I don't remember the exact date, but I know that bullet hole is still in the window. If anybody on this podcast wants to go check to see if I'm lying, there's a bullet hole in the window of Bravo Pizza right there on Geneva Mission.
They just didn't bother getting it fixed.
Nah, they just put like 2 plexiglasses over the bullet hole, like, you know what I mean? So, and there's another one on the side, on the ground. I think that was the bullet that hit me, you know, because we all just like skirmished inside the Bravos on the ground, and you know, then he ran away. He was I know the guy. He was another young kid. We were just misguided, undecided, man. Just, you know, thriving off our pain. And now that I'm older, I understand, you know, as brown people, because he was a Filipino individual, just like, you know, dealing with whatever trauma was in his life, you know, and then taking it out in a way on someone else, like I've done, because, you know, hurt people. And now that I've healed, you know, heal people.
That must have been, if you were 13, that must have been around 91 or so. Mm-hmm. Were you here for 89 for the earthquake?
I definitely was here for the earthquake.
Let's talk about it.
I was at a little football practice at Lincoln Park. I was actually in Delhi City visiting my grandparents because I played on a little football team out there. And I was going up for a pass, and then the ground just started shaking. And then the ball just hit me in my chest, and then it was just like, I didn't understand what was happening. I just knew it was shaking, and I'm seeing these light poles, like these huge, larger-than-life light poles. They're like swaying, dang near hitting the ground, like back and forth like a seesaw. And just people were running and crying. It just was shaking, and I just started like kind of like hyperventilating, you know, and I just was scared. It was like, you know, I was a kid. So it was just like, the world's coming to an end. It's over. And I was thinking about my mom. I was thinking about my little sister because she was right around there. We were all at the park. And, you know, things were just shaking and it was just crazy. And then when it stopped and I was still alive, I just started running home. And it's crazy because I started running home and I ran past my sister. She was hiding under a car. And she called my name. She's like, Damien. And I go back and I looked. And I came back and I went and got her. I was like, come on. And then we ran to the house. And it was just like crazy. And there was like a few little aftershocks after, if I could remember. But I know that we had went into my grandmother's house and she had this big oak table, and she made us get under the table, you know, and we were under there for a while. And like the last while, we were trying to get a hold of my mom, and she was at work, and she this is the first time I said, hope she don't get mad, but I don't care if she do. She was a phone sex operator, my mom, because she's got a beautiful voice. And I can't remember, the phones weren't working or anything like that. So I don't know, somehow, some way we had got in contact with her. She was okay. But then when she got home and then she came home, she was telling us about how her building she was in, like the whole building was swaying and rocking back and forth. She was seeing that. And now that, you know, after I started really thinking, you know, about, because I was looking around like trying to see what's going on. Like I seen the light pole swaying, and I'm at a park. So like the park, the sand was kicking up, all the park structures were swaying, and the houses, and then I started seeing a bunch of stuff, and it was just like, it was incredible. It was definitely like, you know, nothing I've ever felt before until that next earthquake.
I was gonna say,
right.
After the first one, and then you're like, okay, we made it, but you don't know what's coming next.
You don't know.
You have
what's
that
coming
anxious
next.
feeling,
right?
Like,
we were definitely. I remember being scared that whole night, like that whole night, like you don't know what's gonna happen. I think there were a few little aftershocks after that, nothing too major. But I remember getting to the house, and my grandparents, they were real old school, so they had a lot of those like porcelain figurines and stuff like that. A lot of that stuff fell, you know what I mean? My grandmother had a lot of plants and stuff like that. A lot of stuff, it was messed up. The house was trashed, you know what I mean? The house was trashed.
Your grandparents' house?
In my grandparents' house. At that time, I believe we were staying with them at that time because, you know, we moved around a lot.
I do want to hear more about your youth if you got anything, but because we went to 13, I was doing the math.
Right,
I was like, let's talk about 89.
Yeah, no, yeah.
I'd like to hear about 89.
So, you know, as a kid coming, like I said, I moved around a lot, so I've been blessed to experience a lot of the city. When we were young, we lived in Valencia Gardens, the projects, lived in Alice Griffith, Double Rock projects, lived in West Point, in the projects. And, I remember the city being, there's always been, difficulties and violence and stuff like that. But there was also like a sense of love. It was a sense of, San Francisco togetherness to a certain degree that's kind of been lost, And now, mind you, I'm not one of these big kick the gentrifiers out of here. They change this. They're making everything worse, stuff like that. I'm not all that. I'm all about inclusion because at the end of the day, we're all immigrants in this country. Nobody is a really, Nobody really has a stake here except for the natives, But I do remember, a time where, the traffic wasn't as bad. The bus system, the buses weren't as crowded. You didn't have to worry about as much. It wasn't as much desperation as it is now to survive. But there are, but even with that, there's a lot more programs now. I remember there not being a lot of programs in the city. Especially for youth, especially youth from low-income families. Only program I can remember really, for to help families and stuff like that. Maybe I was too young and didn't know. It was like the welfare. You're talking about my youth. I remember standing in them long lines to get the free food and the food stamps and stuff of that nature.
That's coming from the government, though.
Yeah.
Now I think what you're talking about is there's more like nonprofit groups.
Right. Yeah. Now there's no more nonprofit groups. You know what I mean? Giving back to the community.
And
I think
yourself,
right. And I think that was birthed out of my generation and the generation after me. Stuff like that was birthed out of that for the necessity of that. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the reasons why I do what I do now, because I know what I needed when I was at that age, to help guide me and stuff of that nature and help build community. I remember the schools being a little bit more loose, if I was saying, more open. Things are more tight now because, of course, back then you didn't have that many school shootings and mass shootings and stuff like that. So I definitely see the change. San Francisco has always been we had a huge, if you know your history, we had a huge hippie inflection and generation. So it's always been some love. That's why our homosexual brothers and sisters felt comfortable coming out and creating a whole community here in San Francisco like no place else in the world, because there was that aspect of love in San Francisco.
I think
what I mean?
It was music, it was art, it was poetry, writing. It was a culture.
Yeah, people like Harvey Milk, not afraid to stand out. See, that's the whole collective of San Francisco. You got that love and the art and all that stuff, but at the same time, you also got gangster. You know what I mean? Because that's San Francisco. Somebody might get it misconstrued from that's not from here and think it's all about the happy. You know what I mean? But it comes to certain parts of San Francisco, you get your wig split. You know what I mean? It's not no joke. What I mean?
This is why the podcast is called Storied.
Right. Yeah.
It's a double meaning, but yeah,
mm-hmm.
yeah. It's like anywhere, it's rich, complicated.
Right.
History.
So let me tell you a story, then.
Please do.
And let me apologize ahead of time to any of my friends in the Castro community, but when I was young, as young brothers do, I was misunderstood, misguided about certain things. Certain things you don't understand, and certain things you don't understand with anything. You either afraid of it or you just don't understand it. So anyway, that used to be one of the things the young homies used to do, go to that area, and because we're poor, we're trying to get money, we don't know. Big homies tell us, to rob, steal, stuff of that nature. So we go over there, in anticipation to try to rob somebody or something like that. And let's just say every individual is not created equal. You know what I mean?
Right.
You got 3-4 young black dudes from the hood. You think, ignorant, think you can take on the world. You know what I mean? We get this one dude, we can rob and take his money. to say the least, we ran up on the wrong gay brother. You know what I'm saying? And he whooped our ass.
Wow.
You know what I'm saying? It was 4 of us, like, but we were kids. He was a grown man. We were
How
trying
old
to
were
govern
you?
him.
About
13,
okay.
about 13, 14, give or take. I think it was like, yeah, it was before I went to the ranch, because I was still kind of small, because I didn't really like get my size on me till I went to the Log Cabin Boys Ranch. So it was kind of like before then, you know, and we were trying to rob him, you know, not just because he was gay, but he was like in that neighborhood, and we were like, you know, but you could tell that he was gay, he was flamboyant, and I don't have nothing against gay people at all, you know.
But y'all got served.
We got served. We got our ass whooped by this dude, man, and it was like, it was crazy. It was unbelievable, and it was like, you know, and I can't say who was with me because we all swore to never speak about it. Like, yeah, we were like, yeah, that didn't happen. Yep. You know what I mean? Like, we can't tell anybody that we just went over and got beat up by a gay dude trying to rob him. You know what I'm saying? But that was one of my stories for Storied, since we were talking about that from the youth. And I got a lot of stories on the Muni bus. I did a little tagging, you know, as every kid did. You know, they used to call me Ace when I was little. Spent a lot of time riding the Muni bus because, you know, like I said, my home structure wasn't, you know, the best, you know, wasn't the worst. You know, that I have knowledge of the world. I used to think it was the worst, but once you get knowledge of the world, man, then you realize, like, it's not that bad. Like, you know, I had it rough, you know, but I never had to walk 10 miles for clean water or nothing of that nature. You know what I'm saying? So, but I used to be out a lot. I used to run away from home a lot, you know, not necessarily just run away from home. I just didn't go home. You know, hanging out with the homies, sleeping in a lot of abandoned buildings. We had a bando on Geneva Mission that used to be ours. We all used to sleep in there a lot. We spent a lot of time sleeping on buses, sleeping on the BART. You know, a lot of fights on the BART, a lot of arguing with bus drivers, causing havoc, being young kids, you know, up and down, you know, and you know, that's why a lot of the stuff that's going on today has been happening. It's just now we got phones with cameras and social media, so that's been exposed. You know, I've been beat up by the police before in San Francisco. Nobody got that on film. You know what I mean? So it's just a story in the wind. They dumped me behind the garbage can at General Hospital, you know, when I was like 18 years old, just coming back from Glen Mills, you know. But I was, you know, I'm not bashing the SFPD or not. I was doing stuff I shouldn't have been doing. That don't mean it was okay for them to do what they did. They shouldn't have done it. You know what I mean? That's why they dumped me and skirted off, you know. But, you know, I was also in the life, you know, stuff of that nature.
That was Uncle Damien. Check back Thursday for part 2, when Damien will talk about his transformation into a positive advocate for youth and his gig, Uncle Damien Speaks. Music for the podcast is by Otis McDonald. Film photography is by Michelle Kilfeather. Find all 80-plus episodes on our website, storiedsf.com. And while you're there, you can also help support this project by going to our store page and checking out the different pledge levels. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to stay up to date on everything we do. If you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, please rate and review the show for us. If you have ideas of who should be on the show, our email is storiedsf@gmail.com. Thanks for listening.